So then, let us look ahead to the coming year in America. Can it be anything like as dramatic and extraordinary and in some ways alarming as the year that's now coming to a close? On this, we can consult a trio of America experts. Katy Balls is the Times Washington editor, of course. Hello to you, Katy.
Hello.
Hi, and have a wonderful Christmas break. Trevor Honeycutt is the Washington correspondent at Reuters. Hello, Trevor.
Hi, good to see you.
It's lovely to have you here. And Daniel Lippman, who is a frequent visitor to the programme, is the White House and Washington reporter at Politico. Hi to you, Daniel. Just look at a few points. We could talk for 4 or 5 or 6 hours, but I just want to get your thoughts on a few particular points. I'll start with you, Katy, if I can. When you look at what happened over the course of the last year in America and in American politics, there's so many things you could pick out as defining features, but one of them, many would say, is a lurch towards autocratic rule. America obviously is not an autocracy, strictly speaking. We still have in America the courts. We still have Congress. But the direction of travel sort of supports that view. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, it's a year where we've had the No Kings protest, for example, and that was Democrats really seizing on this idea that Donald Trump is ruling like a monarch in many ways and is not going through the checks and balances that previous ones have. He's cutting out process. So much has been done through executive orders, for example, rather than through Congress. And then you look at how fast Trump has moved, for example, on some things like tariffs, and then later the courts catch up with you. But I think having spoken to some of those around the president, he's almost going for this strategy of push really hard, and then if you get stopped a bit of the way, that's still better than asking permission first. And I think the question is this trend that's going to continue in 2026 or not? And actually, there are probably a few signs to suggest that at least there is potential that Donald Trump's grip here might be loosening. So, for example, you just look at the Republicans. One of the things that really struck me from being in America when I first arrived was how, here in the UK, you have a situation whereby Keir Starmer can't really do much, can't really sneeze without having a bunch of Labour rebels potentially stopping his plans or causing a headache. There, Trump seemed to have complete control. But we've seen in recent weeks the Republican Party pushing back on a couple of things, criticising him over a tweet about the late director who was killed by his son, where he talked about Trump derangement syndrome, and also stopping him on gerrymandering plans. So I think there could be a bit of a change coming.
And Daniel Lippman at Politico, do you think the president's somewhat losing his grip?
Yeah, I think if you look at the slide in the polls in terms of approval ratings for Republicans in Congress, that has been very concerning to people in the White House and the administration. They look at how Trump, he came in on a platform of reducing prices, on building the economy, but a lot of Americans are not supportive of the tariffs. That particularly hurt the business climate in the first 6 months of the year. It kind of recovered since, but increased a lot of uncertainty. And if you look at how Trump, people think that he is more focused on revenge and retribution and naming everything after himself instead of lowering the price of eggs in Des Moines, so to speak.
Yeah, look, Trevor Honeycutt, America is a country. It is a constitution that sets up and provides for 3 co-equal branches of government. You've got Congress, you have the presidency, of course, and you've got the courts, the Supreme Court of the United States, at the very top of that legal pyramid. The president couldn't simply seize more and more power at will. Those other branches of government have got it within their power to resist such a tendency. But it's said that those other branches are facilitating rather than objecting a lot of the time. Just give me your thoughts on that.
Well, so we have, setting up right now a significant clash potentially between the president and one of those branches, and that's the Supreme Court, right? So the Supreme Court, a lot of the decisions that they've made, people have noted that many of them have favored the president's power. But it's important to note that the most important decision they made about the president's power was about, his ability to do things while in office without fear. That took place long time ago, and a lot of the decisions they've made since then have been emergency rulings, meaning they haven't been on the merits, but they've just been kind of stopgap measures. But now betting markets suggest that the Supreme Court is set to strike down President Trump's tariff policy, a large majority of his tariffs next month, and so that is a situation where you have one of the president's signature policies. I mean, this is his geopolitics, it's his economic policy, it's his industrial policy. Tariffs have been his weapon for everything. And if you have the Supreme Court tell him that he can't go ahead with that, that sets up a clash like we have not seen in terms of this constitutional setup.
That is so interesting. Katy, is it the expectation? I'm not sure how it's possible to anticipate a ruling from the United States Supreme Court, but is it the expectation that they will do that? They'll strike down President Trump's tariffs. Now, tariffs are supposedly the province of Congress, and the president's imposed them all over the world under the heading of emergency powers. It'll be up to the Supreme Court to say whether that runs or not. But is there a feeling on what they're going to do? Because it would be quite a moment.
Yeah, it is the expectation, because what we have is we do get to hear the judges talking about the decision ahead of making it. And therefore, in all the preliminary hearings, there has been, I think, an increased sense that the case is not going well for Donald Trump. Now, it doesn't mean we can completely predict what's going to happen, but therefore in DC, the working assumption is it's more likely to not go Donald Trump's way than to go it. And you've then had Donald Trump and others making statements during this process saying, if the Supreme Court's limit, the government's hand on tariffs, that would be a problem for all these various reasons. So you can expect the White House will have done some contingency planning. Of course, Trump first term did tariffs, but they didn't do them in this emergency way. And not all the tariffs that Trump has done have been done in this manner. But if you think of many of the Liberation Day reciprocal tariffs, that's really what we're talking about. So it would definitely be a big blow to Donald Trump. It doesn't mean they all go away, but there'd be other routes for him to go down, but it would tie his hands certainly to a degree.
Yeah, I mean, you'd expect on President he would find another route rather than just chuck in the towel. I mean, tariffs are so much a part of his broader strategy. And Daniel, Venezuela, the fleet, the US fleet in the Caribbean, getting ready for, well, we don't formally know what they are there to do, supposedly to intercept drug boats, fishing boats carrying drugs, but the fleet is mighty. And does Congress not have a say in the exercise and the deployment of that kind of military force, and are they likely to take a hand?
Well, Congress has given back a lot of their powers in terms of foreign military interventions in recent years. The authorization to use force after 9/11 was stretched to the limit, basically, where Presidents Bush and Trump and Obama, they all used it in various ways that Congress may not have intended, especially in places like Yemen. But I think with Trump, he has a free hand to move military assets to places where he sees fit. He doesn't need Congress's approval for that. But there's a lot of members in Congress who are wondering what his Venezuela strategy is, because a lot of the fentanyl that they say, they're striking all of these fentanyl boats, that actually comes through the U.S.-Mexican border. And so that is not, it seems like Trump, while he's trying to be the peace president, he likes to see these videos being posted by the Defense Department of them blowing up these boats.